let me introduce product management advisor Rauha Tulkki-Wilke.
Thanks, Henry. Hi, everyone. Really great to be here today, speaking to all of you about product management in a way. Let me share a little bit about my background. So I worked in life sciences all of my life, at least my professional life after graduation, and it's an area that's not particularly well known in Finland. So I was thinking I'll do a little bit of promotion here today to everyone who might be interested in new opportunities in product development and in digital transformation. And my background is to a large extent from a Finnish company or a Finnish originated company called CRF Health, a provider of patient information solutions for clinical trials in life sciences. And I joined pretty much when it was founded here in Helsinki, and I worked there for close to 20 years until it was sold and embedded into an American company in 2020. And since then, I worked more independently. And I also wanted to take the opportunity today to pave a little bit of a broader picture of the innovation and transformation that's happening in life sciences today. So I'll be speaking about many companies in my presentation. But before we start, life sciences may be a term that people are not used to. So what does it mean? Life science is an industry that deals with the well-being of living organisms. So it's about the pharmaceutical industry, the medtech industry, biotechnology, all of that combined. And the biggest part, the most significant, is the pharmaceutical industry. It's really conservative, but it's globally estimated at $1.3 trillion in terms of market size in 2020. And the interesting thing for all of us is that it's really undergoing a digital transformation at the moment, which is creating a lot of chaos and a lot of churn and everything as it's happening. The key focus of this transformation is about digitalizing clinical trials. And this was largely actually driven by the onset of COVID-19. Before COVID started, there were digital solutions, but not really that embedded into all of the processes. So what was born and what was being then invented and taken into mainstream use was the concept of decentralized clinical trials. So this essentially means that patients can participate in clinical trials of new treatments from home instead of everything happening at hospitals and so on. And obviously you can't really do this with pen and paper, with just regular phones or whatever. You need well-integrated clinical digital systems that are really patient-friendly to do all of this, to facilitate the patient journey in these digital clinical trials. And you can see here the change. So before COVID, some 28% of pharmaceutical companies ran decentralized clinical trials. They are currently using, 87% of them are using DCTs to a certain extent. That's probably not to a very large extent at this point. And then 95% of them plan to increase the use of DCTs in the next 24 months. So you can see that a lot of this transformation has been happening in the last 2 years, and it's continuing in the next 2 years. So what's at the core of this from a strategy standpoint? So here on the left side, some maybe softer things. It's really about patient centricity. The focus in these decentralized clinical trials, in this transformation, is on patient centricity in different ways. It's about optimizing inclusivity and diversity. Obviously, that's a big theme globally in, goes through all of our societies one way or the other. But in clinical trials, this actually has a scientific significance, which is really important. And then it's really about measuring what matters to patients. So it's about bringing treatments to the market that impact something that's important to patients. So that could be something like, for example, if you have Parkinson's disease. For a long time, many people working in the pharmaceutical industry were thinking that the tremor is what matters to patients. But actually, after some research, we found out that it's not the tremor that's the most difficult thing for people with Parkinson's. It's the fact that it impacts their cognitive abilities, that they are not able to think as well as they were used to. So this is obviously really fundamental. And then it's about digitalizing trial participation. And these four things obviously are extensive strategies or extensive focus areas and goals would be for any industry. And then on the right-hand side, it's really about the business as well. So what the industry is after is about shortening time to market. It's about being able to utilize patents for as long as they are effective. It's about efficient recruitment of patients. It's really hard in clinical trials to get patients recruited, and many trials fail in that, and it takes longer to take new drugs to the market because they can't recruit patients or the right kind of patients. It's about creating differentiated products, so my drug is better than your drug, type of a thing. And it's about managing cost. And all of these things need to marry up. And you can see it in the strategies of some of these companies that are providing solutions to clinical trials today. And it really, if you can do this effectively, if you can marry these things effectively, you have a better recipe for success, obviously. So what happened when COVID-19 started? So, the world was full of clinical trials being run without patients being connected to these trials in digital ways. And it was a major problem because patients in clinical trials are usually sick, and bringing them to hospitals to receive treatment or to do things for procedures and so on exposed them to the virus. So a lot of these trials needed to immediately make the transition to digital. Major problem, obviously. To pharma companies, a great opportunity for vendors offering digital solutions for clinical trials. Then the first bullet point is actually even maybe the most meaningful one, which is that for treatments and vaccines for COVID-19, obviously everyone has seen how fast they've been brought to market. And this expedited way of bringing them to the market impacted obviously clinical trials. And in normal circumstances, setting up a vaccine trial would have taken something like 3 to 4 months, maybe 5 months, including all of the languages involved. A lot of these trials go live in 50 plus countries because of the global reach. And these trials were set up in record times. And so were the trials for the actual treatments for the virus. And it proved to the industry that it can be done. These were fully digital trials, patients reporting side effects, everything from home, having video conferences with nurses, drugs being delivered to home setting, that sort of thing. And these trials were set up in, let's say, 4 weeks on average to bring these treatments and vaccines to the market as quickly as we needed them. As people observed this, they formed kind of like this movement in the industry called no going back. It was called, which is we can't revert back to the old ways of doing things if we have actually proven to ourselves we can do it better. So today the focus is really in accelerating this adoption. One thing that's really important in these new innovations is about adopting things that have worked in other industries. So it's about looking at consumer services and applying things that work. So it's about, finding hotel online. So how can you find a clinical trial online? A matchmaking service. How can you ensure you are a match with a clinical trial? Participating the trial at a trial site, so why not to do it virtually as for example you do banking today? Sharing medical information, you share a lot of other very personal information today across platforms, so why not medical information? And the only thing that you really need to do in bringing these innovations or practices to life sciences is about ensuring that you go through a few key considerations, which actually can be really difficult, but it's about regulatory acceptance, ensuring there's access to these things by patients, because this needs to be inclusive, and then the global availability of things. So if we then look at decentralized trials, so what is this from a product standpoint? So it's about end-to-end digital, having an end-to-end digital platform for the whole clinical trial that supports services for the whole patient journey in a clinical trial. So it's about collecting all the data that's needed to test and have the evidence about the drug, but it's also about delivering the drug to the patient, having all the interactions with the nurses and the doctors and so on. And there are some really interesting examples of companies that have done this now in the past few years really successfully, where the three biggest ones are Medable, Science 37 and Thread. And Medable, which is the leader of these three, was evaluated at $2 billion last October, and when it raised $300 million. And that's really significant in this industry, obviously, or in any industry in terms of evaluation. The strategies that these companies have really deployed, it's really about time to market. Obviously, COVID-19 hit at a time when they were startups and they started to scale. They were there. There was a huge market for them to take advantage of. So it's about that timing, but it's also about building an ecosystem of partners. So they wouldn't have been able to do it themselves alone. So they've pretty effectively built an ecosystem where they've partnered with existing players to provide expertise and additional things on top. And then it's been about rapid scale up. So, you're a small company, 50 people, suddenly you are awarded 150 clinical trials that need super high quality services. How do you scale up effectively and with high quality? And this is where the challenges lie, and also what these companies have struggled a little bit with, which is the growth of their service organizations, making sure they maintain quality and thereby customer satisfaction. And then it's about dealing with a whole range of global operational and regulatory challenges, which you kind of need to address in a clinical trial setting. And as a result, even though there are a couple of interesting opinions from pharma, which is these companies will replace all of the current kind of IBMs of clinical trials in the next 5 to 10 years. That's the firm belief in the industry. At the same time, they say these decentralized trial companies are really hard to work with at the moment, so they are not giving them any more business. So there's a dilemma for these companies to solve. Anyway, they've done really well. Another interesting example is that of novel measures that are rooted in deep science and technology. So this is quite different from a very platform-heavy approach of decentralized clinical trials, but it's a really integral part of this digital revolution, and that's for two things. So when patients are in a home setting, they are not in the hospital being measured by clinicians or other specialists. All of the data that it is needed about their lives and about their well-being or not well-being needs to be collected in that home setting. So that's typical data, like you would imagine blood pressure, pulse oximetry, heart rate, that sort of things that you would imagine being collected in a hospital. But it's also about new things. So it's about measuring how active they are, or, for example, in case of atopic dermatitis, for example, so eczema, essentially. We are currently looking at how could we measure how much the scratching impacts patients' lives. So, for example, how long every night does a patient scratch themselves during a clinical trial? And then you kind of measure the impact of that. But it's really important if you are a pharma company developing a drug that treats eczema, then being able to objectively have evidence that it actually reduces the time patients scratch themselves during the night when it affects their sleep and thereby their quality of life during the next day is really important, because you can't really ask the patient, can you? Like the other option is to ask them in the morning, so how long did you scratch yourself last night? Or you could give them a diary that every time they wake up during the night that they pop up and then they write in the diary, I was awake from 1:30 to 2:30. And that's not reliable data. So with these novel measures, we are enabling the measurement of things that are relevant to patients that we haven't been able to measure before. And that way we are able to bring treatments to patients that positively impact their lives beyond what we've been able to do up until now. And that also applies to like really significant diseases. Obviously, like, you know, dermatitis can be like a relatively lightweight example, but for example, there's a lot of this work that's currently going on in, let's say, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, where we are able to assess cognition in a home setting much better than before. And there are a lot of these companies. So if you compare to the platform stage, there were a couple of companies that are fighting fighting to be the next IBM, essentially, of clinical trials. But here, this is a fragmented space. And this is a space that really overlaps with medtech. So a lot of these companies that are active in medtech, or some of them are active in like consumer health. There are loads. Adamant Health is actually some company originated here in Finland. KI Elements, they do algorithms for speech recognition. They are just an algorithm company working with the top-notch pharma companies in the world, providing algorithm for speech recognition, and the speech recognition can detect changes in cognition. Great Lake Neurotechnologies in the US, then the Fitbits, so consumer devices. Apple Watch is being used quite a lot. Dexcom, they do continuous blood glucose measurements, you name it. So this is a vast area. The whole medtech space is around 5 billion a year in terms of market size globally. A lot of these companies originate from that space and are now interested in moving into kind of pharmaceutical and the clinical research side of things, because there's a huge market as well. So if you think about it from a product strategy point of view, so if you were a medtech or you were a specialist in something like this, you wanted to embark on something like this, what's important? So it's about understanding that with deep technology, you can really build differentiation and barrier to entry. And you can do it so that you focus on key diseases. So look at where your skills are, look into that match with key therapeutic areas, key indications, key diseases, key kind of disabling things, and find that differentiation and your sweet spot there. Then it's about ensuring there's regulatory acceptance, and that you build with scientific evidence. And that's really hard to encounter. It's really hard also to get these things adopted without having that scientific evidence, and that requires investment. But you can also work closely with pharma to build this up and then scale, because a lot of pharma have a deep drive into adopting these sort of measures, because it provides them that differentiation that we spoke about a couple of slides ago. So being able to build differentiated treatments to people means you need to be able to measure something about the impact to patients in novel ways that no one else has been able to show. But the challenges are there as well. So to a certain extent, it's a little bit unclear how you gain that regulatory acceptability, even though the industry is now putting together standards around this. There are regulations, but also more profound, like harmonized standards that are being put in place to help this. It's a really fragmented space. Could be an opportunity, obviously, but it's also, makes it somewhat challenging because there are so many small companies. And then these small companies, on the other hand, may have it, it may be difficult for them to provide really globally scalable solutions. So, if you are tiny, 5, 10 people, limited investment, you are, given the opportunity to work on a clinical trial, that spans across 50 countries. How do you deal with that? So being able to partner, being able to be part of bigger ecosystems is really important in this space. And then, as the third example, I was thinking, it's an interesting question. So when it came to those decentralized trials, that firm belief by pharma that these decentralized trial companies will replace the IBMs in 5 to 10 years' time. But can these IBMs reinvent themselves? They are certainly trying to. So one of the really most established companies in the life sciences space is called Medidata Solutions. It's the leading clinical trial platform of today, the real backbone of clinical trials. I think they are embedded in something like 18 of the top 20 pharma, 20 pharma or so, and they are really fighting hard to make sure they are the choice for the next generation clinical trials space. They were acquired from NASDAQ by Dassault Systems in 2019 for $5.8 billion. So if you now compare Medidata, which is a really established business, highly profitable, embedded in all of these pharma companies, does hundreds and hundreds of clinical trials a year. You compare them to that Medable, that was $2 billion last October, has served in all of its existence 150 trials. Interesting to see their evaluations so close, but that describes the mindset of investors when it comes to this space. So then, what is Medidata doing from a strategy perspective then to, make this move? So they are really renewing their technology platform. So it's been that backbone platform. So it's been the back end stuff, being used by specialists all through the years. And now that platform needs to be brought into that patient centricity era where it's used by patients, their caregivers, in the patient journey setting. It's a really hard change from a technology standpoint. The platform needs a lot of rework. Can Medidata do it? We haven't seen yet. And then it's, on the other hand, utilizing those existing relationships. So they are embedded in all of those companies. They have access to everyone in the industry. Can they utilize those relationships to make the transition? That's what they are trying. And time will tell. The challenges are there really, it's really about that platform renewal that they need to deal with. But what's on their side is the general pharma mindset. So this is a conservative industry. We were just competing, with the next speaker on which one of us comes from the more conservative industry. But I will definitely tell you, life sciences is very conservative. And the pharma mindset is that a trusted existing provider is better than a bag of new ones. So if they can just stay with who they're currently working with, they would be so happy, even though they might not have the absolute best solution in the space. And that could very well turn in Medidata's favor, because everyone's certainly working with them today. So, key strategies at play. Partner ecosystems, do not do it alone. This has arrived in life sciences. No one's trying to do it just by themselves anymore, and it couldn't work because of the digital journey, it being so all-encompassing to be able to integrate the whole clinical trial space. It's about regulatory acceptance. You can't, be successful without it. It's about timing, as we saw with COVID-19, the companies being there, ready to grasp that opportunity. And it's about completeness of solutions, because you can't really deal with clinical trials unless it really works. It's a regulated industry, needs to work, conservative. If you lose one patient in Colombia because your system didn't work, you are out. You won't be given the next study. That's the mindset. And then, what's really new in this industry is pre-competitive collaboration. So companies coming together, especially in the decentralized trial space in novel measures, working together to establish standards, to establish solutions, build these ecosystems, and then essentially with the mindset that if we make this work, if we make this digital transition work, then there is enough space, there's enough revenue for everyone. So those are the new things in this space.
Before I let anyone else ask questions, what I really like, this is an excellent example of how the product itself doesn't guarantee success, right? You need to have so many other things around it in order to succeed. You could just build the best product in the world, but still you wouldn't succeed, right? How do you build a strategy in an environment like this when there are so many different things that actually affect the result? So what would you do?
So what my previous self would have said that you build a strategy around your assumption on what will happen, and you review that assumption as frequently as possible so that you can kind of steer the course. Now I'm thinking what's even more important is that openness to work with others, because I think that if you just have sustainable and competitive advantage in what you do, then by working with others, being open and having that ecosystem and that pre-competitive collaboration there, you can learn so much more, and you can take the whole ecosystem with you on the journey to change, that you are going to be more impactful and be able to actually implement the change that's required. Because if you work in a silo, no matter what strategy you have, you may not have enough power to turn things around.
So collaboration even over your kind of organizational limits.
Yeah.
All right.
So accepting the fact that you can actually, if you do something with your competitors, it can benefit all of you more than not doing it with those.